Hello everyone and welcome back to Indie Insight. Last week I had the chat to catch up with Jonathan Smars, a senior developer on Iron Gate's recent indie hit Valheim. With a plethora of experience already under his belt in both the AAA and indie scene working as a 3D artist on titles such as Battlefield Bad Company and Aliens Colonial Marines, we talked about the recent port of Valheim to Xbox and Xbox Game Pass, what he's learned from his long career in the industry and more. A special thank you to Complete Xbox for organising this interview, and if you'd like to check out the full transcript of the chat with Jonathan, you can follow the top link in the description.
Okay, brilliant. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me. Firstly, I'm really happy to be doing this interview because, Valheim has recently come to Xbox and Xbox Game Pass, so as someone who doesn't have that huge sort of collective of friends on PC, to get to play it with them on Xbox was a huge sort of great sort of time for a while anyways, as we kind of stumbled our way through the beginning of what is Valheim, and I think only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to kind of delving into the content that's already available in that game. I want us to kind of start out very quickly with Valheim to start, and we'll move over to a couple of other bits before obviously returning to Valheim. But I want to talk about specifically the port to Xbox, which is obviously a huge move for the game as well because it has such a huge popularity with players on Steam and on PC. What was it like sort of adapting that core gameplay over to console? Because I imagine when you're kind of putting the restraints of, having a controller as opposed to a keyboard, it can maybe be a little bit daunting. Kind of what was the main sort of pressure points you were trying to hit as you went through that port?
Yeah, so we had an external studio who did most of the work for the port because we are quite a small team at Iron Gate and we want to focus on building the game for our current players, like finishing the biomes basically and working on the content updates. But of course, since we chose to have crossplay, it does mean that we really have to make sure that everything that's made on Xbox is the same on PC and that we have complete feature parity, and we release everything at the same time. So of course we have to be quite involved as well. And the game in itself, we already had full controller support and everything kind of worked already, but there's definitely a lot of improvements that needed to be made to the controller and to the UI to make sure that it's like 100% workable with only a controller. Never being in a menu where you lose focus with a controller or things like that, and that the text inputs and stuff like that, everything works with the Xbox interface and stuff like that. As well as a number of other things, like both that there's a bunch of requirements on Xbox, like there's this kind of huge list of things that you can and cannot do on an Xbox, which does not exist on Steam. So we'd have to go through that and make sure that everything is being followed. And as well, of course, the performance, the Xbox, since we release this on all the Series models and all the Xbox One models as well, we had to make sure that it's running good enough on all the consoles. So yeah, quite a bit of work was done on that as well.
Yeah. Do you think, obviously, with Valheim coming over and, it's a great game on PC, it runs great on Series X and S, was there ever a worry that maybe there would be performance issues with the sort of base Xbox Ones and whatnot going forward, or was that kind of not really in the equation at all?
Yeah, for sure. It's not a given that it's going to work great like on the lower end Xbox One, for example. Valheim is a game that it kind of looks low resolution for some people. We have this kind of retro feel, but it's definitely not a low end. It does require quite a bit of hardware to run well, both because of all the post processing and effects and lighting is very modern, and as well as players might end up building quite big bases, like huge entire cities and things like that. And even on the most high end computer at the moment, you will see quite a lot of lower frame rate. So running that on a low end Xbox is quite difficult. So we have done a lot of improvements already, and it's definitely working. But there's still a lot of room for improvement, which is something that we hope to work on more in the future as well. To be able to support bigger builds and bigger cities and so on.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely as soon as I was in the game, I remember one of the few things me and my friends kept doing was we kept stopping to look at the beautiful skybox that Valheim has, because it's one of those things that you don't really expect, because as you mentioned, the game has this sort of low poly feel to it. And then when you look up in the skybox and you kind of see stuff at a distance, it looks almost like a painting, and you're just like, this is amazing. I love looking at this. I want to ask specifically because it's one of the programs we don't really see. I mean, a whole lot of on Xbox, which is of course the game preview program, and a lot of them kind of the games that stick out in mind is the Anacrusis, which came out in January last year for the game preview program. Kind of walk me through what it's like, because obviously early access on Steam is kind of, it's a tried and true formula at this stage. A lot of people have done it. The game preview on Xbox is kind of more of a recent phenomenon that people have started to kind of delve into. What was it like kind of tackling that aspect of going onto Xbox, and was there a huge learning curve there with how they run things as opposed to the way you can do it on Steam?
Not so much on my end, to be honest. There's definitely, early access has been around for quite a while on Steam. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of early access games, but I do think that there are games that do well on early access, that are kind of suited for the format, and I do think that Valheim is like one of them. I think with that type of more of an open-ended kind of a sandbox game where can work quite well, and we have made sure to really focus on polish and not having tons of bugs and work in progress like prompts here and there that a lot of early access games have, and we've got a lot of praise for that. So I think that we're doing something right in that aspect. So I think that it probably should work quite well as well on the Xbox. I mean, to be honest, I don't really know the intricacies of how it is on Xbox compared to PC at the moment, but hopefully it works well. I mean, there's quite a few players playing on the Xbox at the moment. Probably there will be more once we reach 1.0 and it's still not in the game preview. Hopefully there's still interest by then, but yeah, we'll do our best.
Yeah, fantastic. Another part as well, I mean, I would kind of be remiss to not ask about Xbox Game Pass, which is obviously the game also came to Xbox along with the service of Xbox Game Pass. Was there a specific reason for that? Because obviously Valheim has, as we mentioned, this huge community on PC already. So I imagine kind of advertising it to the console audience, at least just completely from my own perspective, would have been like, okay, well, we've got this huge market. We can kind of maybe just bring that over to console, which maybe isn't the case at all. But was there a specific reason behind choosing to go down the Xbox Game Pass route? Was it a benefit to you guys as developers in that sense as well?
I mean, we've had so many people ask us to release on consoles, and it's something that we think would be very fun to do, just to be able to give more players the ability to play the game. So, I mean, even though it's also a little bit difficult because we also want to be able to focus on actually finishing the game, and porting and working on several on platforms definitely can complicate things. But that's also why we have this external studio working on that. Yeah, I mean, we had a dialogue with Microsoft, and we thought it would be interesting to try to release with them. And we thought, I mean, going on Game Pass was there's pro and cons of everything, but I think we worked out a nice deal with them. And the nice thing about being on Game Pass is that there's a whole lot of players who will be able to play the game without having to think about do we want to buy the game first or not. So I mean, it puts the game in the hand of a lot of players quite immediately.
Yeah. Obviously, Game Pass before has had a load of titles kind of in that same sort of survival, open world crafting sort of section. I mean, I think specifically of Ark Survival Evolved, those sorts of games have been on Game Pass before. When you were kind of bringing the game over to consoles, was it a specific angle you were going for of maybe, obviously you mentioned there were people who were asking for Valheim to go to console, but was it also a case of you wanted to attract some of the players that had already been on console sort of survival games like Ark, and you wanted to kind of bring them in and show them how good Valheim was as well?
I mean, if I'm completely honest, I'm not as involved in that whole part of it. It's more I mean, I'm mostly programming, building on the game, and we talk about everything, but I mean, it's mostly our publisher who might think more in these kind of strategic ways of thinking in which ways we should sell it or which platforms we should reach and so on. So yeah, you'd have to ask Coffee Stain about that if you want some more specifics, I think.
Yeah, of course. Let's talk a little bit about your work though, because I was doing a bit of research before the interview, and I was just kind of blown away, first of all, because whenever you see an indie game, you kind of expect the person in that sphere to have worked just purely on indie games, and maybe that's a prejudice on my part for thinking that they don't go outside that area at all, but you've done quite a bit in the AAA space, specifically with stuff like Gearbox and with EA as well, with regards to Bad Company, and then you go over to stuff like Colonial Marines. You know, you did 3D environment art for those games. You know, what was it like working in those scenarios with sort of, what did you learn specifically from those that you can now incorporate into Valheim?
Okay, yeah, it's kind of a broad question. I think that, like you said, I mean, I don't know the statistics. There's probably a ton of the indie people, indie game developers, are maybe like going into indie immediately and working on games, and that can work out really well, or sometimes not. But I do think there's there's a ton of indie game developers who come from the more AAA space as well. On my part, like, I mean, yeah, I was a 3D artist, like mainly 15-ish years ago. I started out as a modder, and then from that, like, I was making 3D models for like Half-Life 2 mods and Quake mods and Unreal Tournament mods and stuff like that. I think I had my first. I was working on like some old some car models, and I sent, like, while I was in high school, I sent a model to an Unreal mod called Unwheel, which is like a driving mod for Unreal Tournament 2003. And they were like, "Oh, nice cars," and they put it in their mod. And then PC Gamer kind of featured this thing. Like, I had my own my mod, my car in PC Gamer when I was in high school, which was very cool for me.
Yeah.
So I started out as making only 3D models and worked on that for a while on some studios, both like on location at DICE, but also as a contractor. But I ended up, like, I also had a huge interest in coding and programming and design. So I thought it would be fun to be able to build build an actual full game by myself, rather than having to be dependent on having somebody else implement everything that I did visually. And I mean, yeah, like now if you look at engines, there's like things like Unreal Blueprints and stuff, which is awesome. You can really build whole games without any coding knowledge, but that wasn't really the case back then. So I just started learning programming, and now I'm much more a programmer than I am an artist. But yeah, on Valheim I still do. I mainly do programming and a little bit of everything, like putting all the pieces together. But I do occasionally do a few 3D models here and there if there is a lot of work for them to do already, or if it's something that like, for example, we did the ballista for the Mistlands update, and that was like, I was building that whole functionality anyway, so I thought it's also fun to model it and do the whole process. So
yeah. I want to kind of go back a little bit, because I know you mentioned you did mods for stuff like Half-Life 2, and I'm particularly interested in that because I know Nuclear Dawn was one of the games you worked on. Was that purely at the very early stage of just doing 3D modeling, or was there a lot of programming involved in that as well?
Nuclear Dawn is a whole chapter by itself. Interesting, and I met a whole bunch of really great people on that mod. I mean, sadly, we never released it as a mod. It was later released as a full game by a different studio that kind of got the rights from us as a mod team after we had kind of realized that this game wasn't going to be finished. But at that point, I was only working as a 3D artist, but also kind of how should you say, like a little bit like trying to produce it, trying to get the team together and working a little bit on the game design aspects as well. But at that point, the code was it was like a little bit of scripting, like just like setting up Half-Life. I don't remember like the model definition files and whatever you needed to do, the animations and stuff, or the RTS structures and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you think sort of working on stuff like that, obviously with a smaller team, the modding scene is a lot more comparable to something like when you're going over to sort of try and help run and do the work on Valheim as well, as opposed to maybe when you were doing the AAA stuff with Colonial Marines and Battlefield and all that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. I mean, I think it's great to have experience in both areas. Like, I mean, working at an actual big, say, AAA company, you definitely get into the, like, say, production mode more. You have to learn to actually, just like producing full assets and like being effective and disciplined and everything like that. But I think working on a mod team is much more similar to working on a small indie developer rather than AAA, because like for us, we are, what are we? Yeah, 13-ish. Like I guess we're like 7 people on the development side of Valheim at the moment, and everybody kind of needs to chip in a little bit everywhere. And we're kind of, it's much more like working as a group to figure out each detail, usually talking about everything with everybody who wants to be able be involved. And working in a big company, I mean, it also has its pros and cons, but you're much more in one corner of the game working on your little aspect, and you maybe don't have so much to do to say about like the whole game. Yep.
How do you think then when you're kind of, because I know even like your Twitter account makes fun of the fact that you're like kind of just the general person for just doing a lot of stuff on Valheim, and you don't have like this specific role on it. But like, is there an element of like when you're going over to something like Valheim, how do you now describe your job position? Because you kind of just do a bit of everything. There's not really a catch-all phrase for everything you do, is there?
No, I mean, no, I think that goes for everybody at Iron Gate. I mean, yeah, we are a little bit more in one area, everybody, but I mean, I think that's also one of the aspects of working on a small indie team is being able to do different things and also enjoying doing different things. Like I wouldn't really want to go to work every day and do the exact same thing every day, which is, I'm not going to say that's how it is at AAA, but it's a little bit more like that. Like, so for us, everybody has to be a little bit more jack of all trades. Yeah, I mean, also another aspect of this is that in Sweden, it's not as super important with job titles. Like, what is your official title? Oh, your career, like thinking about your career as much like trying to get the next title or the next senior or lead or whatever everything is called. We barely even know what all those things are. So at Iron Gate, we basically just say you can pick whatever you want to be called, and that is your title. Since we're all doing a little bit of everything, that kind of doesn't work anyway. So
I need to also talk because they say that success isn't easy, but Valheim is, as we mentioned already a number of times, accumulated this huge amount of success on Steam, and given it's still already in early access, do you feel there's a certain level of pressure on you guys as a team now to kind of deliver really good update after really good update all the way up until 1.0 release?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, just having a lot of players play the game is awesome, and it's just so inspiring for us to read. Like, we get a lot of nice emails like about people being very happy with the game and different praise, but that also means that there's a lot of players asking for when is the next update coming, what is this and what is this, and any update that we release, I mean, we do get a lot of positive like response, but we also of course get other people who are like, why did you change this? Why did you do this? And why did you break my mods and things like that, which is gonna happen every time we update basically. So yeah, I mean, it definitely does add some pressure. I guess the nice part about the success here is that we can really take our time on making it really good rather than having to push for a deadline. But with that said, I think most people at Iron Gate, we kind of put the pressure on ourselves. Like, we really want to make something that is really good, and we don't want to take too much time. Like, we don't want it to take forever. I mean, yeah, people think that we are maybe a bit slow sometimes, and I mean, I can understand that as well, but it is a lot of work to work on every aspect of the game and make sure that everything is up to par and tested so that we don't release something that is all of a sudden breaks the game for too many people.
Yeah, well, as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, but in this case, it's Valhalla wasn't built in a day. Looking at the game, obviously your background in mods and all that, do you have a sense of like sort of sympathy for people that are like, oh my God, all my mods are broken now when you update the game? Is that something that you want to obviously cultivate as the game goes closer to 1.0? Because we've seen games with huge mod scenes continue long after their I suppose, derived sell-by date, if that makes sense. People keep pumping content to the game. Is that something that you're looking to kind of cultivate more in the future for kind of future updates as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I really feel for the mod developers because I've been one as well. So I mean, I kind of know the pain, but since we have if we would have official mod support now, we would spend so much time. It would really make our development so much slower to really make sure that we're not breaking things, like breaking mods every update. So, I mean, what we've said now is that we do not have official mod support. So if you're using mods, you really have to know that, like, okay, you're more than welcome to. We're not hindering it. We're even allowing it. Like, I mean, we're keeping everything, the code basically open so that people can see it and mod it and everything. And we do support, like, I mean, if we get questions, we will give answers and we will try to support in any way we can. But it is a little bit hard to see that, we're always breaking mods. And nearing closer to release, like hopefully this is something that I would really want to see, having better support for mods going forward after 1.0. I think that we will see, I mean, I'm not sure if it will come with 1.0 or after or something like that, but I would really like us to be able to get to a point where we're not going to break mods every time we update. So yeah, that's definitely a goal.
Mhm. I'm interested a little bit in the general gameplay of Valheim, if you're able to talk to that. Is there sort of, I know there's a lot of comparisons, especially with people that will look at the survival crafting elements, sort of the boss elements of Valheim and think, okay, Minecraft, which is kind of inevitable with this sort of genre of games now. Was there a sense of like, because I know when people originally go in, it's kind of left up to them to learn how to do things, and that's totally like, that's the way the game angles it out, and that's great in that sense. Is there an element that you guys wanted to strike this balance between giving people tutorials for stuff like this, but also not holding their hand constantly throughout the game?
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely not the type of both developers or players who want to have a hand-holding game. I mean, we do like the game to be a challenge, and we do like, we're not huge fans of overly complex long tutorials. So I mean, I can only speak for myself here again, but like I think that we kind of strike a nice balance of exploration and like trying to figure things out, but also having like a few hints here and there, like with the Raven flying in, to just like make sure that you didn't miss certain points, and you can disable it if you don't like it at all. And also, I mean, part of it ties into that the Valheim kind of design is to not overcomplicate anything. Like if it's too complex to understand by yourself, then maybe it's too complex. So try to keep things simple, but still having, of course, an interesting depth. That's also kind of a challenge a lot of the time. Like, what things should we add? What things shouldn't we add? Is it kind of the Valheim way, or is it too complex?
What do you think actually with the move over to console now, and console players now getting a chance to play the game? Obviously, they've probably heard a bit about Valheim. Maybe they haven't done too much research into it and kind of looked at it and thought, oh, all my friends are talking about this, I'll give this a go. What do you think is the one thing that they'll least be expecting from Valheim?
Wow. Yeah, I have no idea. Like, I mean, I think it's different for each person. Like, I mean, somebody going in blind, which I think is always the best way to start a game or a movie or anything, not knowing anything, for me at least, it's more of an interesting experience, like both exploring it yourself, figuring things out, that aspect. But then again, there's a lot of people who do like to learn, like maybe look up some videos on YouTube ahead of time, or just like they've heard tons and tons from their friends about this game and they can experience it after that. So yeah, I think it's very different. Like, I think that is one of the strengths of Valheim. It's a game that caters to a lot of different types of players. Like, some people, yeah, I mean, some people just want to build. Some people don't care about that. They just want to like kill all the bosses. Some people just want to explore, and some people want to sail. Some people want to plant carrots, onions, and stuff. So, and the nice thing is, like, you can play it in any way and any pace that you want, and you can also play that together with your friends. And it even just like kind of, it's just good if you have a varied group. So like, somebody wants to do the exploring, somebody wants to do the building. I mean, that's just strengthening your multiplayer group, basically. So I think that's also one of the reasons why it works so well, and why it's kind of created a lot of online communities playing together.
100%. I mean, is it like sort of this case, you want to move forward with the game now? How are you sort of approaching, obviously, because there is the option to play solo as well, how are you constantly looking at that element and trying to think, obviously this is a multiplayer game first, you can have up to 10 players playing in the one server. What do you want to look at with regards to the solo aspect of Valheim in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, that really answers a lot of what, like, there's a lot of great ideas coming in, and we have a lot of ideas, of course, but every single thing we want to put in the game, we want to make sure that whatever it is, it works just as well for multiplayer as it does for single player. So there's tons of good ideas where, like, this would be awesome if you played this by yourself, or this would be awesome if you played with friends. But if it doesn't work for both sides of the game, then all of a sudden we are designing two games, or we're prioritizing one over the other, which we don't want to do, because, I mean, we definitely have tons of players playing multiplayer, but we also have tons of players playing single player, and I really think it should be up to the player at the end of the day, without sacrificing part of the gameplay, feeling like, oh, this would be cool if I just had a friend with me. So yeah, it should be. It has to work both ways, which is, yeah, like I said, one of the reasons why we just can't add every cool idea that we come across.
I want to ask just briefly, because obviously we talked about, you mentioned at the beginning that you obviously team wants to bring the game over to console, and it is on Xbox now. Is there, and obviously you can only talk about this so much as you're able to, but with regards to sort of, is there future plans for bringing it to PlayStation 5? And also alongside that, there was mention, about how, physically demanding the game is on a PC anyways. Is it possible to port that game to a Nintendo Switch?
At the moment, we're only looking at the Xbox. So that is what I can say about consoles. I mean, I would love to see it on the Switch, but I kind of doubt that it would be able to run at the moment. Like yeah, maybe like an extremely slimmed down version. So yeah, I mean, it would be a fun experiment to try, but yeah, you never know.
Talk about constraints to the Xbox One, bring it to the Nintendo Switch, and then we'll see what we're on about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we get it running on the Switch, then it's definitely going to be working well on all the other platforms. So you never know.
I suppose final question I have then, obviously, Valheim is edging closer towards that 1.0 release. For you personally then, what are you looking to do afterwards? Is there any sort of talk about, okay, maybe I'm going to stick here and do more indie stuff, or would you like to do more contract work with AAA things, or is that something that you're always constantly doing anyways?
No, I mean, we are working only on Valheim at the moment, and that's, I mean, once that is finished, we will either keep working on. I mean, we don't really know what we're going to do at that point, but we have said that Valheim is not a live service game like some people might expect the game to be these days, where you like keep making updates forever and ever and ever. Valheim does have a beginning, it does have an end. That being said, would like to support it as much as possible and have it live as long as possible as well. So I mean, I hope hopefully we will keep working on it, maybe making some updates after as well, but that is nothing I can say for sure at this point. Whatever happens after that, I mean, we will also be making more games, not in the AAA space or contracting in that regard. I mean, we are a studio and we'll be making our own games.
Well, fantastic. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no problem.